An arrogant millionaire shouted at the new secretary to translate a contract in front of everyone. He wanted to humiliate her before the board of directors, certain she wouldn't understand a single word. But no one in that room imagined what she was about to reveal right then and there. If this beautiful story of perseverance and love interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you are watching from. Continuing. Monday morning arrived with the characteristic hustle and bustle of New York City. On the 42nd floor of a glass-mirrored skyscraper on Park Avenue, Sterling Developments occupied 3 entire floors, boasting a privileged view of Central Park. There, between glass-walled offices and marble hallways, executives in Italian suits, assistants with the latest tablets, and hurried interns carrying leather folders circulated daily. The environment breathed luxury, power, and the absolute conviction that only the best deserved to be there. Maya Sullivan pushed through the revolving door of the lobby at 7:40 in the morning, carrying a worn fabric bag and wearing a simple navy blue blouse that matched her modest black tailored trousers. Her brown hair was pulled back into a discreet, unadorned bun. No flashy earrings, no high heels, no imported perfume. Only an upright posture and the attentive gaze of someone arriving for another first day of work. The receptionist, a young woman with impeccable nails and a mechanical smile, took a few seconds to look up from her computer screen. When she finally noticed Maya's presence, the smile lost some of its luster. "Good morning. I'm here for the administrative department. Today is my first day." The receptionist checked the list of new employees, confirmed the name, and handed over a temporary badge without any enthusiasm. 41st floor. Look for Deborah. She's the sector coordinator. Maya thanked her with a nod and headed toward the elevators. Inside the mirrored cabin, she observed her own reflection next to 2 executives talking about quarterly goals and stock market shares. They didn't even notice her presence. To those men with perfectly adjusted ties and Swiss watches on their wrists, she was just another gear in the company's invisible machinery. The 41st floor had a different atmosphere than the luxurious lobby. This was where the administrative support rooms were located, where dozens of employees worked in cramped cubicles, typing reports, organizing documents, and meeting demands from the upper floors. The sound of printers, ringing phones, and quick conversations created an atmosphere of constant productivity. Deborah was a middle-aged woman with short hair and the tired expression of someone carrying too many responsibilities. Seeing Maya standing at the entrance, she beckoned her to come closer. "You must be Maya. Welcome. We don't have much time for pleasantries here, so I'll get straight to the point. Your job is to support the 42nd floor, organize documents, prepare meeting materials, print reports, and bring coffee when requested. Basically, you do whatever is necessary so the directors up there can focus on important decisions. Understood?" Maya nodded. "Perfectly." Deborah pointed to a desk in the corner of the room, next to a rusty metal filing cabinet. "That's your station. The computer is old, but it works. The password is on that post-it stuck to the monitor. Any questions, ask Chloe or David. They've been here longer and know the rhythm of the place." Before Maya could say thank you, Deborah had already turned away to answer a call. The tone was clear. There was no room for warm welcomes or employee integration here. The work was what mattered. Maya tucked her bag under the desk, turned on the old computer, which took nearly 2 minutes to boot up, and began reviewing the task list already open on the screen. 17 items, all urgent, all to be delivered by the end of the day. The following hours passed at a frantic pace. Maya organized piles of contracts, checked data in spreadsheets, printed presentations for board meetings, and carried trays of espresso to the rooms on the 42nd floor. Every time she crossed the elevator threshold and stepped onto the executive floor, she felt the weight of disdainful silence. Executives in meetings didn't even look up when she entered to leave coffee cups on the glass tables. Executive secretaries greeted her with an automatic nod, devoid of real interest. At lunchtime, Maya went down to the cafeteria on the 20th floor, where the operational staff had their meals. The atmosphere was completely different from the aseptic luxury of the upper floors. There, white laminate tables shared space with plastic chairs, and the smell of homemade food from lunchboxes warmed the air. She sat at a table next to 2 cleaning ladies and a maintenance man. The conversation was light and sincere. They talked about their children, bills to pay, plans for the weekend, and the rising price of gas. No one there pretended to be more than they were. No one judged anyone by the clothes they wore or the position they held. "You're new, aren't you?" asked one of the women, Mrs. Higgins, with a welcoming smile that lit up her weathered face. "I started today. I'm in administration, supporting the 42nd floor." "Ah, the big shots floor," commented the maintenance man with an ironic laugh. His name was Wayne, and he had the calloused hands of someone who fixed what others broke. "Be careful up there, lady. Those people think they're better than everyone else, especially the owner, Robert Sterling. That man has money and power, but as for humility, none to be found." Mrs. Higgins nodded, stirring her spoon in a container of rice and beans. "It's true. I worked cleaning his floor for 2 years. Once I dropped a pen on the floor while cleaning the boardroom table. He was sitting right there on his phone. He didn't even look at my face. He just told his secretary to have the cleaning staff replaced because he didn't want clumsy people around. As if I were invisible, as if I didn't have a name, a history, or dignity." The other woman, Mrs. Gable, added in a low voice, almost ashamed to speak ill of the boss. "He treats people well if they're on his level. The directors, the executives, the investors. But the rest to him are just people who get paid at the end of the month. And that's it. So I've seen him walk right past me in the hallway as if I were part of the wall." Maya listened in silence, absorbing every word, every hurt, every shared experience. She knew very well what it was like to be invisible. She knew intimately the feeling of being judged by appearance, origin, or job title. Throughout her life, she had learned that the world often values the packaging more than the content, and that for some people, humility and simplicity were synonyms for mediocrity. But she had also learned something more important, that a person's true value never depended on the opinion of others. When she returned to the 41st floor, she resumed her work with the same silent dedication. She proofread texts, corrected small flaws in reports, and verified data. No one noticed, no one praised her. But she continued, because excellence never depended on an audience. At the end of the afternoon, Deborah left a stack of documents on her desk. "Maya, these papers need to be filed on the 42nd floor. Leave them in the executive boardroom. They'll need them tomorrow morning." Maya took the stack and went up the elevator. The 42nd floor was nearly empty. Most of the executives had already left. Only a few lights were still on in the offices. She entered the spacious boardroom, with its oval fine wood table and leather armchairs. She placed the documents neatly on the table, and as she prepared to leave, noticed an open envelope next to the main chair. Curiosity wasn't her flaw, but attention to detail always was. She approached and saw that it was an international report. The header was in French. "Accord de partenariat stratégique entre Sterling Developments et Paris Global Holdings." Maya picked up the document carefully and began to read. Her hands glided over the pages while her eyes scanned every paragraph. The proposal involved a strategic partnership between Sterling Developments and a French real estate development firm. Everything seemed technically correct until she reached Clause 7. There, in the description of the percentage split of future profits, there was a subtle but significant inversion. The percentage destined for the American company was recorded as 42%, when it should have been 62% as mentioned in the introduction of the contract. An error of that type could cost millions. Maya reread the passage 3 times to be sure. Yes, it was wrong. The inversion was too subtle to be noticed by someone who didn't completely master the technical French used in international contracts. But for someone who knew the language and understood the structure of this type of document, the error jumped out like a silent siren. She thought about warning someone. But who? Who would take the observation of a new employee hired to organize papers and serve coffee seriously? She imagined the scene, her knocking on a director's door, explaining that she had found an error in an international contract, being met with looks of suspicion, and perhaps even discreet laughter. No, this wasn't the moment. She put the document back in the exact place she found it, adjusted the edges so it stayed in the same position, and left the room in silence. She went down the elevator with a heavy heart, grabbed her bag, and left the building. As she walked down Park Avenue toward the subway, the city swirled around her. Hurried executives talked on cell phones, street vendors offered umbrellas and phone chargers, and street performers played guitars hoping for a few coins. New York never stopped. It never rested. And in that frenetic rhythm, Maya was just one among millions. She thought of all the times her voice had been ignored, simply because it didn't come with an important title or expensive clothes. She remembered the teacher in public school who said she would never be anything. She remembered the bank manager who denied her scholarship application because he thought she didn't have the profile to study abroad. She remembered every closed door, every look of contempt, every time she had to prove she was more than she appeared to be. But Maya knew how to wait. She knew that life has its own way of revealing the truth, and that, sooner or later, opportunities come to those who are prepared. It wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about dignity. It was about showing that competence has no social class, no appearance, and no price tag. The sun was beginning to set over Manhattan as she descended the stairs of the Grand Central subway station, blending into the crowd of tired workers heading home. The train was crowded, as always. She held onto the handrail and closed her eyes for a moment, letting the swaying of the car lull her thoughts. No one in that giant city knew who she really was. No one imagined the journey she had traveled to get there. No one knew about the sleepless nights, studying with dictionaries borrowed from the library. No one knew about the effort to win a full scholarship to a European university. No one knew about the sacrifices, the renunciations, the tears wiped away in silence. And for now, that was exactly how she preferred it. Because Maya had learned that silence is also a form of strength, that discretion can be a strategy, and that sometimes the best time to act isn't when you want to, but when life offers the right opportunity. Tomorrow would be another day, and Maya would be ready for whatever came. The following days turned into a predictable but intense routine. Maya always arrived before 8 in the morning, when the hallways were still silent and the coffee machines hadn't yet been turned on. She liked those minutes of silence before the office buzz took over. It was the moment she could organize her thoughts, review the day's tasks, and mentally prepare for another day of invisibility. On the 41st floor, the work dynamic was clear. Produce fast, deliver without error, and never question. Deborah distributed demands like someone dealing cards in a poker game without looking at the faces of those who received them. Maya accepted everything without complaint. She organized financial reports, checked data in endless spreadsheets, prepared presentations with colorful graphs, and printed documents that would be discussed in meetings she would never actually participate in. But while everyone around her performed tasks mechanically, Maya did something different. She observed. She paid attention to every detail. When she reviewed a report, she didn't just check the formatting, she analyzed the content. When she organized documents for meetings, she read the agenda items and understood the context of the discussions. When she took coffee to the 42nd floor, she listened to fragments of strategic conversations that revealed the behind-the-scenes of corporate decisions. It was during one of these trips to the executive floor that Maya saw Robert Sterling for the first time. He was leaving the boardroom accompanied by 2 directors, laughing loudly at a joke that probably only made sense to those who shared the same circle of power. He wore an impeccable charcoal suit, shiny Italian shoes, and a watch that certainly cost more than the annual salary of several employees combined. He was around 45 years old, with graying hair combed back, broad shoulders, and a smile that mixed charm and arrogance. His presence commanded the room. When he spoke, everyone listened. When he passed, everyone moved aside to make room. He was the kind of man accustomed to being obeyed, admired, and feared in equal measure. Maya was standing in the hallway, holding a tray with empty cups she had just collected from a room. Sterling passed her without even glancing her way. To him, Maya was part of the furniture, just another functional element of the office, without a face, without a story, without importance. She wasn't offended. She expected it. But she stored the scene in her memory like someone filing an important document for future reference. Back on the 41st floor, Chloe, one of the colleagues working in the next cubicle, started a conversation during a quick break. "Did you see Sterling today?" she asked with a mix of fascination and fear. "That man is impressive, right? They say he built this company from scratch. Started with a small construction firm, and today he's one of the biggest developers in New York. But they also say he's tough as nails. He doesn't accept mistakes. He doesn't accept excuses. If you slip up, you're out." Maya nodded, feigning little interest. "I've heard. He seems like a very decisive person." "Decisive is an understatement," chimed in David, who was typing frantically on his computer without taking his eyes off the screen. "The guy is relentless, Last year, he fired a director in front of everyone because the guy disagreed with him in a meeting. It doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. If you cross Sterling, you're gone. Chloe sighed. But what can you do, right? We're here to work, get our paycheck, and go home. There's no use trying to change who's in charge. The best thing is to keep your head down and keep moving. Maya listened to it all in silence. She didn't agree, but she also saw no reason to debate. Every person had their way of dealing with injustice. Some accepted it, others confronted it. Maya preferred a third way: prepare and wait for the right moment. That same week, on Thursday, something happened that caught Maya's attention. She was organizing documents in the boardroom when she heard raised voices coming from the next room, which was Sterling's private office. The door was ajar, and although it wasn't her intention to eavesdrop, the words echoed down the hallway. "Are you sure this partnership with the French is safe?" a male voice said, probably one of the directors. "We're talking about millions invested. If something goes wrong, the entire company could feel the impact." Sterling's voice replied with impatience. "I've reviewed the contract 3 times. Everything is fine. The lawyers checked it. The finance team approved it. There's no error. Next week we have the final meeting with the Paris group to close the deal. So relax and trust the process." There was a brief pause before the other voice resumed, now more cautious. "I just think we should ask for an external review. International contracts are complicated. A misinterpretation can be costly." Sterling gave a dry laugh. "External review? You think I'm going to spend money on consulting when I've already analyzed everything myself? Trust me, Marcus. I know what I'm doing. I didn't get where I am by being insecure." The subject was closed. Maya finished organizing the papers and left the room quickly before anyone noticed her presence. But the words continued to echo in her mind. She knew there was an error in that contract. She knew no one had noticed. And she knew that if the deal was signed that way, the company would lose a fortune. Part of her wanted to scream, knock on the door, and explain. But the other part, the one that had learned from life, knew no one would listen. Not at that moment. Not coming from her. So she waited. On Friday, Maya was called by Deborah for a quick talk. "We're going to have an important meeting next Monday. Executives from France are coming to close a partnership. It's a big deal. They'll need support all day long. You'll be responsible for organizing the materials, serving coffee, and ensuring everything is in place. Do your best because this meeting is decisive for the company." Maya confirmed she would be present and dedicated. Deborah smiled satisfied and went back to her own tasks. But Maya knew that meeting would be much more than a common workday. That would be the moment she had been waiting for, even without knowing exactly when it would arrive. It would be the opportunity to show that competence is not measured by title or appearance. That true knowledge doesn't need spotlights to exist. During the weekend, Maya thought a lot about what she would do. It wasn't about showing off, it wasn't about revenge. It was about doing what was right. It was about not allowing an error to cost an entire company too much, regardless of how she was treated there. On Saturday, she walked through Central Park, observing families with children, couples holding hands, and elderly people feeding ducks in the pond. New York was giant and chaotic, but it also had its refuges of peace. She sat on a bench under the shade of a tree and let the light wind touch her face. She thought about everything she had lived through, the difficulties she faced, the doors that closed, the opportunities she had to fight for with tooth and nail. She remembered her mother, Mrs. Iris, who worked as a house cleaner in 3 different homes to pay for her studies. She remembered her father, Mr. Jack, who woke up at 4 in the morning to drive a city bus and returned home exhausted, but always with a smile for his daughter. She remembered the nights she studied late, memorizing words in French, Spanish, and English, dreaming of a different future. And now she was here, in a company that treated her as invisible, but would soon discover she was much more than she appeared. On Sunday, Maya organized her clothes for the week. She chose a simple white blouse, well-pressed black trousers, and comfortable flat shoes. There was nothing special about those pieces, but she knew that clothes never defined anyone's value. Before sleeping, she mentally reread excerpts of the contract she had seen. Every word, every comma, every number. She wanted to be absolutely sure she was right, and she was. On Monday morning, she woke up earlier than usual. She had a simple breakfast, toast with butter and a glass of orange juice. She looked in the mirror and saw the same woman as always, hair tied back, no elaborate makeup, no jewelry, no ostentation. But she also saw something more. She saw determination. She saw preparation. She saw the silent strength of someone who knows who they are, regardless of who sees them. She grabbed her bag, locked the door of the small apartment she shared with a friend in Astoria, Queens, and headed down the stairs to the street. The subway was full, as always, but Maya didn't mind the crowd. She was used to it. It was part of her reality. When she arrived at the Sterling Developments building, the sun was already illuminating Park Avenue. She went up to the 41st floor, put her things away, and began to prepare for the most important meeting of the week. Deborah gave quick instructions, handed over a list of materials, and asked that everything be perfect. There can't be any mistakes today, Maya. This meeting is decisive. Maya guaranteed everything would be impeccable. And she kept her promise. She organized the documents, prepared the boardroom, and checked every detail. When the time came, she went up to the 42nd floor, carrying the coffee tray, ready for another day where she would be ignored. But something inside her knew that day would be different, very different. The executive boardroom on the 42nd floor was impeccable. The oval fine wood table reflected the soft light of modern chandeliers. Black leather chairs were perfectly aligned. On the table, organized folders, executive pens, and crystal glasses awaited the participants. Maya had prepared everything with the precision of someone who knew that details mattered, even when no one noticed who prepared them. It was 15 minutes before the start of the meeting when the first executives began to arrive. Directors from Sterling Developments entered, talking in low voices, adjusting ties, and consulting tablets. Soon after, the international guests appeared. 3 men in dark suits with heavy accents and serious expressions. They were representatives of Paris Global Holdings, a French company specializing in high-end real estate development. Maya remained discreet at her post near the wall, next to the cart with bottles of water, coffee, and juices. Her function was simple: refill drinks, deliver documents if requested, and remain invisible. As always, Robert Sterling entered last, as someone who makes a point of making an entrance. He greeted the Frenchman with firm handshakes and calculated smiles. His voice filled the room with that tone of absolute authority that accepted no challenge. "Gentlemen, welcome. Today is a historic day for our partnership. We are going to consolidate an agreement that will transform the luxury real estate market in New York and Paris." The Frenchman nodded politely. One of them, Jean-Pierre Laurent, who seemed to be the group leader, opened the folder and began leafing through the contract. "Monsieur Sterling, we have reviewed the document sent and have some doubts about Clause 7. We would like to clarify before we sign." Sterling nodded with confidence. Of course, ask whatever you like. This contract was reviewed by our legal and financial team. Everything is in order." Jean-Pierre continued, switching between French and English with some effort. "In Clause 7, regarding the split of future profits, it is written that Sterling Developments will have 42% and Paris Global will have 58%. But at the beginning of the contract, in the Strategic Objectives section, it is mentioned that the split would be 62% for Sterling and 38% for Paris. There is a contradiction." There was a brief silence. Sterling frowned and took the document. His eyes scanned the pages quickly, but it was evident he didn't master the technical French used in that type of contract. He tried to hide it. "Let me see here. It must be a typo. We'll correct that before the signing." But Jean-Pierre didn't seem satisfied. He turned to his colleagues and began speaking in rapid French, pointing to sections of the document. Maya, who was a few feet away, understood every word. They were questioning the seriousness of the American company. They were saying that if even the basics weren't correct in the contract, perhaps the partnership wasn't as reliable as they imagined. Sterling noticed the rising tension and tried to regain control. "Gentlemen, please, it's just a technical detail. We can resolve this quickly." One of the American directors, Marcus, who was sitting next to Sterling, whispered something in his boss's ear. Sterling shook his head with impatience and replied in a low but audible voice, "I know how to read a contract, Marcus. I don't need a babysitter." The atmosphere in the room became uncomfortable. The Frenchmen exchanged looks. Maya observed it all in silence, her heart racing. She knew this was the moment. She knew that if she did nothing, the meeting could end without a deal. But she also knew that interfering meant stepping out of the shadows and exposing herself to everyone's judgment. Jean-Pierre spoke again, now with more firmness. "Monsieur Sterling, forgive my frankness, but we need total clarity before signing. This clause is written in a confusing way. There is a passage here that mentions redistribution of share in case of future expansion, but it is drafted in an ambiguous manner. We need someone who understands technical French to explain exactly what it means." Sterling tried to respond, but it was clear he was lost. He looked at the directors around the table, but none of them spoke French. The tension grew every second. It was then that Maya, without planning, without calculating, spoke in a low voice, almost a whisper. Clause 7 establishes that, in the initial phase, the split is 62 for Sterling and 38 for Paris. But in case of expansion into new markets, the share inverts progressively, reaching 42 for Sterling and 58 for Paris. The silence that followed was deafening. All eyes turned to Maya. Jean-Pierre raised his eyebrows in surprise. The American directors looked confused, and Robert Sterling fixed her with a gaze that mixed disbelief and irritation. "What was that?" Sterling asked, his voice sharp. Maya felt the blood rush to her face, but she kept her posture firm. "I was just explaining what is written in the document, sir." Sterling gave a short, humorless laugh. He stood up from his chair and walked toward her, holding the contract. "So you're telling me you understand French? That you know how to interpret international contracts?" Maya hesitated for a second, but replied calmly, "Yes, sir. I read the document while I was organizing the materials." The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Sterling looked around as if seeking complicity from the other executives for the absurdity he was hearing. Then, with an ironic smile and a challenging glint in his eyes, he said loudly so everyone could hear, "Since you're so smart, why don't you translate the entire document right here in front of all of us? I want to see if you really know what you're talking about, or if you're just trying to show off." The challenge echoed through the room like a sentence. Many there believed Maya would be exposed to ridicule, that she would be forced to admit she had exaggerated, that she would be publicly humiliated and probably fired immediately after. Maya felt the weight of the moment. Every pair of eyes was on her. She could feel the expectation, the disbelief, the judgment, but she also felt something deeper. She felt her mother's voice saying she was capable. She felt the pride of her father who worked so hard so she could study. She felt every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every obstacle overcome. She took a deep breath and walked to the table. She took the document with firm hands and began to read. Accord de partenariat stratégique entre Sterling Developments et Paris Global Holdings. Strategic partnership agreement between Sterling Developments and Paris Global Holdings. Her voice, initially soft, gained firmness. She translated every paragraph with impressive fluency, without stumbling over any words, without hesitating at any technical term. She explained the clauses with clarity, detailed the percentages, and clarified the conditions of each phase of the partnership. Jean-Pierre Laurent leaned forward, paying attention to every word. His French colleagues did the same. As Maya progressed in the translation, the expressions in the room began to change. Surprise replaced disdain. Respect began to take the place of disbelief. When she reached Clause 7, Maya explained with surgical precision. The clause establishes that during the first 3 years of the partnership, Sterling Developments will hold 62% of the profit share generated by joint ventures in the United States, while Paris Global will hold 38%. However, should the partnership expand to European markets, the share is redistributed progressively over 5 years, reaching the inverse proportion of 42% for Sterling and 58% for Paris. The error in the current document is that this inversion was recorded as immediate when it should be progressive. This completely changes the value of the negotiation, Jean-Pierre confirmed with a nod. Exactly, that is exactly what we wanted to clarify. The wording was ambiguous and could have caused future problems. Maya continued translating until the end. When she finished, she placed the document on the table and took a step back. The silence that followed was deep and heavy. No one knew what to say. Jean-Pierre was the first to break the silence. He looked at Sterling and said with a respectful smile, "Monsieur Sterling, you have an exceptional collaborator. I rarely see someone with such a complete command of technical French and international contract terminology. The translation was perfect." The other two French executives confirmed with nods. Sterling, who moments before had tried to ridicule her, remained silent. His face was red, divided between embarrassment and surprise. Maya said nothing. She just waited, standing with her hands clasped in front of her. There was no triumph in her expression. No arrogance, only the quiet dignity of someone who knows their own value. Marcus, the director sitting next to Sterling, broke the uncomfortable silence. Well, I think now we can correct the document with total clarity and proceed with the signing. Jean-Pierre agreed, but before sitting down again, he looked at Maya and asked, "What is your name?" "Maya Sullivan." "Mademoiselle Sullivan, but merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. You saved this meeting." Maya just nodded slightly and returned to her post next to the drinks cart, but everyone in the room knew that something had changed irrevocably at that moment. Robert Sterling sat down again, but his posture was different. The man who always commanded everything with absolute authority now seemed smaller, more human, more flawed, and the woman he had tried to publicly humiliate had just revealed herself to be the most competent person in that room. The news spread through the hallways of Sterling Developments with the speed of a wildfire. Even before the end of the day, everyone already knew that something extraordinary had happened in the 42nd floor meeting. The details varied as they passed from mouth to mouth, but the essence remained the same. The new employee, the one no one really knew, had surprised everyone with an impressive knowledge of French and international contracts. In the cafeteria during the afternoon break, groups gathered in small animated circles of conversation. Mrs. Higgins, the cleaning lady who had talked to Maya on the first day, commented with pride, as if she had discovered a hidden treasure. "I knew that girl was different. From the first day, she had a way of looking, of listening, that showed intelligence, but no one noticed because she didn't make a point of showing off." Wayne, the maintenance man, shook his head, impressed. "They say she humiliated Sterling in front of the French, that he tried to make her look ashamed and she turned the tables. I wish I could have seen his face, but not everyone reacted with admiration. In some corners, especially among executives who thought themselves superior, there was discomfort and even resentment. How could a simple administrative clerk have a better resume than theirs? How had she managed to hide all that? Some whispered that Maya must have lied on her resume. Others hinted that she just wanted to draw attention. On the 41st floor, Chloe and David surrounded Maya as soon as she returned to her desk. "Is it true what they're saying?" Chloe asked with wide eyes. "That you translated an entire contract in front of Sterling and the French?" Maya just confirmed with a discreet nod, trying to downplay what had happened. "It was just a translation. Nothing major." "Nothing major." David let out an incredulous laugh. "Maya, you don't understand. No one challenges Sterling and comes out unscathed, much less a new employee. And you didn't just challenge him. You proved he was wrong in front of everyone. This is historic." Deborah appeared at the door of the room with an expression Maya couldn't completely decipher. There was surprise, but also something like contained admiration. "Maya, the Human Resources Department wants to speak with you. Go up now." Maya's heart raced. Would it be a firing? A warning? There was no way to know. She just nodded, grabbed her ID, and headed for the elevator. As she went up, she tried to calm her thoughts. She had done what was right. If it cost her her job, at least she would have a clear conscience. The Human Resources Department was on the 44th floor. Maya was received by Fiona, the HR manager, a woman in her 50s with short blonde hair and thin-framed glasses. "Maya, sit down, please." She obeyed, maintaining her upright posture, even with uncertainty weighing on her shoulders. Fiona opened a folder and began leafing through documents. "I'll be direct. Today's meeting caused a huge repercussion. Mr. Sterling asked us to investigate your professional and academic background. He wants to know exactly who you are." Maya felt a tightness in her chest, but replied calmly, "My full resume was sent when I applied for the position. It's all there." Fiona gave a small, almost ironic smile. "Exactly, that's the problem. No one read it properly. When you were hired, your resume went through an automatic screening. They saw you had a college degree, experience in administration, and that was enough for the position. But no one took the trouble to read the details. Until today." She turned the computer screen so Maya could see. There was her full resume with all the information she had provided when she applied. Bachelor's degree in international relations from New York University, full academic merit scholarship, for a master's in international cooperation at the Sorbonne, Paris, fluency in French, English, Spanish, and Italian. 3 years of experience as an official translator at international conferences, participation in business partnership projects between the US and Europe, certifications in intercultural negotiation and international commercial law. Fiona paused and looked directly at Maya. You have a resume that any executive in here would love to have. Why did you apply for a basic administrative position? Maya took a deep breath before answering. Because I had been looking for a job for months and no one was calling me. Whenever I sent my full resume for high-level positions, I received automatic responses saying my profile wasn't suitable, or I simply didn't receive any response at all. I discovered that sometimes being overqualified is a problem. Companies think you'll ask for a high salary or that you'll leave as soon as a better offer appears, so I decided to accept whatever came up. I needed to work. I needed to pay my bills, and I thought that by being inside a company, I'd have a chance to show my value over time. Fiona listened attentively and made some notes. I understand. Well, the situation now is this. Mr. Sterling wants to talk to you personally. Tomorrow morning at 9 in his office. It's not a punishment. He just wants to better understand what happened. Maya thanked her and left the room. She went back down to the 41st floor with a turbulent mind. She didn't know if she should feel relieved or worried. She finished the workday in silence, organized her things and went home. That night she could hardly sleep. She lay in the small room she occupied in the shared apartment in Astoria, staring at the ceiling and mentally replaying every moment of the meeting. Had she done something wrong? Should she have stayed silent? Or had she done exactly what needed to be done? The answer came in her mother's voice in an old memory. Mrs. Iris always said that true competence doesn't need to ask permission to exist. That knowledge is not arrogance, and that those who are afraid to shine end up living in the shadows of others. The next morning, Maya woke up early, showered, and chose a simple but well-kept outfit. White blouse, black trousers, flat shoes. She tied her hair back as she always did and looked in the mirror. She was still the same person. Nothing had changed, except the fact that now everyone knew who she really was. She arrived at the building at 8:30. She went straight up to the 42nd floor and told Sterling's secretary she had been summoned for a meeting. The woman, who in previous days barely looked at Maya, now treated her with a different kind of respect. You can sit there. He's already waiting for you. At 9 o'clock sharp, the office door opened and Robert Sterling appeared. He wore an impeccable navy blue suit, but his expression was less arrogant than usual. There was something different in his eyes, perhaps embarrassment, perhaps curiosity, perhaps respect. Maya, come in. Let's talk. She entered the spacious office, with a panoramic view of Park Avenue. She sat in the indicated chair, maintaining a firm posture. Sterling sat behind the desk and remained silent for a few seconds, as if carefully choosing his words. I'll be honest with you. Yesterday I made a mistake, a big mistake. I tried to humiliate you in front of everyone because I thought you were showing off, trying to draw attention, but you weren't. You were just doing what you knew how to do, and you did it very well, by the way. Maya listened without interrupting. Sterling continued, I read your full resume this morning, and I was ashamed. Ashamed because you have an education that I will never have. Ashamed because I hired you to serve coffee and organize papers when you could be conducting international negotiations. Ashamed because I judged you by the clothes you wear and the position you hold, and not by your competence. He paused and looked directly at her. Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you demand a better position when you were hired? Maya replied calmly, without resentment in her voice. Because I learned that demanding respect doesn't work. Respect isn't demanded. Respect is earned. I could have arrived here with my resume under my arm, banging on the table and demanding to be recognized. But that's not how things work in the real world. In the real world, those who judge by appearance will never see what's behind it. So I chose to work in silence, do my job well, and wait for life to show my value at the right time. Sterling nodded slowly, absorbing every word. And you were right. I was exactly the type of person you described. I judged you by your appearance. I underestimated you because I thought someone with simple clothes and a discreet posture couldn't have anything important to offer. But I was completely wrong. He opened a drawer and took out a document. I want to correct this mistake. I'm transferring you to the International Relations Department. You will work directly with me and the directors on all negotiations and partnerships with foreign companies. You will have a salary compatible with your education and experience, and you will have an active voice in the company's strategic decisions. Maya felt her heart race. It was more than she expected, much more. But she also knew that this wasn't a favor. It was recognition. It was justice. I accept, and I promise to give my best. Sterling extended his hand. I know you will, and I hope you give me the chance to learn not to underestimate people, because clearly I still have a lot to learn. Maya shook his hand firmly. When she left the office, she felt a mixture of relief, satisfaction, and hope. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't an arrogant triumph. It was just the feeling that finally she was being seen for who she really was. In the elevator, she looked at her own reflection in the mirror. The same woman, the same hair tied back, the same simple clothes, but now with a different future ahead, and all she had to do was be herself. The following Monday brought a completely different reality for Maya. When she arrived at the Sterling Developments building, she didn't get off on the 41st floor. This time, she pressed the button for the 42nd and felt the elevator carry her to a territory that before seemed inaccessible. The doors opened, revealing the same marble hallway, the same glass-walled rooms, but now with a totally new perspective. Fiona from HR was waiting for her at the executive reception, accompanied by a young assistant carrying a box of office supplies. Good morning, Maya. Let's show you your new workstation. They walked down a side hallway to a large room with a view of the city. There, several organized desks formed the International Relations Department. Executives talked in English on the phone, while others reviewed documents in different languages. The environment breathed professionalism and dynamism. Maya was led to a desk near the window, equipped with a high-end computer, 2 monitors, a telephone, and a comfortable ergonomic chair. It was a stark contrast to the cramped desk and old computer she had occupied days before. This is your place now. You'll work directly with Daniel, who is the director of the sector, and with Mr. Sterling himself on international negotiations. Any questions you can ask. Maya thanked her and settled her things. Before she could turn on the computer, a man in his 40s with graying hair and modern framed glasses approached with an extended hand and a genuine smile. Maya, right? I'm Daniel Carter, Director of International Relations. Welcome to the team. I've heard a lot about you and I'm looking forward to working together. The greeting was warm, without a trace of suspicion or resentment. That surprised Maya positively. Daniel pulled up a chair and sat next to her. Look, I'll be honest. When Sterling told me he was bringing you here, I was curious. I looked up your resume and was impressed. You have experience in areas we desperately need. Most of the team here masters English and Spanish, but technical French and experience with European contracts are rare. You're going to be essential for the new projects we're planning. Maya felt a genuine relief. She had feared finding resistance, envy, or sabotage from colleagues at the executive level, but Daniel seemed truly interested in her contribution. I'll do my best to help the team, Daniel smiled. I know you will. In fact, we already have a project waiting for you. The partnership with Paris Global was just the beginning. We're negotiating with an Italian sustainable architecture firm and another Portuguese real estate investment group. Both will require technical translations and contract reviews. I'll pass the documents to you later today. Throughout the morning, Maya was introduced to the other members of the team. Some received her with genuine curiosity, wanting to know more about her background and experience. Others kept a polite distance, still processing the rapid rise of that employee who days before was serving coffee. Lunchtime arrived, and Maya went down to the cafeteria. This time, however, she knew things would be different. When she entered the room, several faces turned in her direction. Mrs. Higgins and Wayne waved excitedly from afar, calling her to sit with them. Maya crossed the cafeteria and sat at the same table as always, with the people who had treated her with dignity since the first day. Girl, you've become a celebrity here, Mrs. Higgins commented with a proud smile. Everyone is talking about you. They say now you're up there working with the big shots. Maya gave a modest smile. I changed sectors, yes, but I'm still the same person. Wayne joked. Ah, but now you're going to have lunch with the executives, right? You're going to become fancy like them. Maya shook her head firmly. Never. I haven't forgotten where I came from, and I don't forget who treated me well when I was nothing in the eyes of many people. You were kind to me when no one else was. I won't forget that. Mrs. Higgins held Maya's hand over the table. You're a special girl, Maya, and I know you'll go far, but never lose that humility. That's what makes you different. The following weeks were intense. Maya dived into the work with total dedication. She reviewed contracts in French, Italian, and Spanish. She participated in video conferences with European companies, translating simultaneously and clarifying technical points. Her presence in meetings became indispensable. Robert Sterling, who before barely looked at her, now consulted her frequently. In a meeting about a luxury condo project in partnership with Italian investors, he stopped in the middle of the presentation and looked at Maya. Maya, can you explain this passage of the contract that is in Italian? I want to make sure everyone here understood correctly. She explained it clearly, breaking down each clause and ensuring there was no room for misunderstanding. At the end of the meeting, Sterling called her for a private talk. Do you realize how things have changed? He asked in a reflective tone. 3 weeks ago, I didn't even know your name. Today, I can't close an international negotiation without consulting you. And do you know what that taught me? That I was wasting talent because I was too proud to see beyond appearances. Maya listened in silence. Sterling continued, I always thought that to earn respect, a person needed to impose themselves, wear expensive clothes, speak loudly, and show power. But you showed me that true respect comes from competence and that humility isn't weakness, it's strength. He paused and looked out the window, seeing the city stretch to the horizon. I want you to know that I'm learning from you, and that I'm going to try to be a better leader, not just for you, but for all the employees. Because if I judged you wrong, how many other competent people have I already let pass unnoticed? Maya replied with sincerity. Mr. Sterling, we all make mistakes. What matters is recognizing them and changing, and I see that you are doing that. In the following months, Maya consolidated her position as one of the most respected professionals at Sterling Developments. She participated in international trips, conducted complex negotiations, and became a reference in multilateral contracts. Her name began to appear on official documents, in corporate presentations, and at industry conferences. There was a particularly significant moment when the company received a delegation from Germany interested in a sustainable development project. Maya was summoned to lead the negotiation. During 3 intense days, she coordinated meetings, clarified legal and financial points, and mediated conflicts of interest between the parties. In the end, the deal was successfully closed, and the German representative made a point of publicly praising her professionalism. That was when Maya realized she had stopped being the exception and had become the standard. Young employees began to seek her out for career advice. Interns saw her as an inspiration, and even experienced executives openly recognized her value. But despite all the recognition, Maya remained true to herself. She continued wearing simple and well-kept clothes, without yielding to the pressure to wear expensive brands just to impress. She continued having lunch with Mrs. Higgins and Wayne whenever possible, because she knew that true friends are those who are by your side in difficult times. She continued arriving early and leaving late, working with the same silent dedication as always, because excellence was not a goal, but a habit. One afternoon, while reviewing a particularly complicated contract, Daniel entered her room with a serious expression. Maya, I need to tell you something. The headquarters of the Italian company we're negotiating with specifically asked for you to lead the next meeting. They said they trust your analysis more than any other professional they've worked with in the US. Maya looked up from the document, surprised. They asked for me. Daniel nodded. For you. They said your technical precision and your communication skills are exceptional. And do you know what that means? It means you're no longer just a valuable employee to us. You're becoming a reference in the market. Maya felt a wave of emotion, but maintained her composure. I'll do my best. As Daniel left, Maya stayed in silence for a few minutes, processing everything that had happened since that first day when she entered the building carrying a worn bag and being ignored by everyone. She thought of her mother, who still worked cleaning houses, but now with immense pride in her daughter. She thought of her father, who cried with joy when she told him about the promotion. She thought of every obstacle overcome, every prejudice faced, every closed door that forced her to find windows. And she realized that her journey was never about proving anything to anyone. It was about proving to herself that it was worth continuing, even when the world said otherwise. She went back to work, reviewing every line of the contract with the same dedication as always, because in the end, that was what defined her. Not the title, not the salary, not the recognition, but the silent excellence of someone who does what they love with dignity and competence. And that was an achievement that no one could ever take away from her. A year had passed since that Monday when Maya first entered the Sterling Developments building. 12 months, that seemed like an entire lifetime when she stopped to reflect on everything that had changed, both around her and within her. Sterling Developments was no longer the same company either. Subtle but significant changes began to happen, starting from that landmark episode in the boardroom. Robert Sterling, who before commanded everything with absolute arrogance, began to listen more. He began to value contributions that came from unexpected places. He began to see people beyond titles and appearances. In a board meeting months after the event, Sterling had made an announcement that surprised everyone. He established an internal valuation program where any employee, regardless of position, could present ideas and suggestions directly to the board. Furthermore, he determined that all candidate resumes for positions be analyzed in full, and not just by automatic systems. "When I hired Maya, I made a mistake that could have cost this company dearly," he said before all the directors. "I judged her by her appearance and by the position she accepted to occupy. I almost lost an exceptional professional because I was too arrogant to see beyond the obvious. This cannot happen again. Not in this company. Not under my leadership." The statement had an impact. Executives who before treated lower-level employees with disdain began to rethink their attitudes. It wasn't an overnight change, but it was a seed planted, and gradually the corporate environment began to transform. Maya witnessed this transformation from within. She saw when a young intern from the finance sector presented an innovative idea for cost optimization and was publicly praised by Sterling. She saw when a cleaning lady suggested a reorganization of working hours that improved operational efficiency and received formal recognition. She saw when an administrative assistant, who before was invisible, was promoted after demonstrating exceptional data analysis skills. Each of these stories echoed her own, and Maya knew that in some way her example had contributed to it, but she didn't feel an arrogant pride. She felt gratitude. Gratitude for having had the opportunity to show that true value doesn't come from where you are, but from who you are. On a rainy Friday afternoon, Maya was in her office reviewing a contract with Spain when she received an internal call. It was Sterling's secretary. "Maya, Mr. Sterling is asking for you to come up to his office when you can." She went up to the executive floor, where Sterling's office occupied an entire corner of the building, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of New York City. Sterling was standing, looking at the city with his hands in his pockets. "Maya, come in. I wanted to talk to you about something important." She approached and waited. Sterling turned around with a serene expression. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened since you arrived here, and I realized that you didn't just change my company. You changed me. You taught me that true leadership isn't about imposing fear or displaying power. It's about recognizing talent, valuing people, and having the humility to learn, even from those who are below you in the hierarchy." Maya listened in silence, touched by the words. Sterling continued, "I want to make you a proposal. We are opening a branch of the company in London, focused on expansion into the European market, and I want you to lead this project. It would be an international director position. You would have total autonomy, your own team, and the freedom to implement your ideas." Maya felt her heart race. It was an extraordinary proposal, but it was also a difficult decision. "Can I think about it?" Sterling smiled. "Of course. You don't need to answer now. But I want you to know that this isn't a favor. It's recognition. You deserve this opportunity." Maya thanked him and left the office with a head full of thoughts. That night, she went to visit her parents in the modest neighborhood where she grew up. The house was small and simple, but full of love. Mrs. Iris prepared a special dinner, and Mr. Jack turned on the TV so they could watch the news together, as they did every Friday. During dinner, Maya told them about the proposal. Her mother's eyes filled with tears of pride. "My daughter, you achieved everything I ever dreamed for you, and you achieved it the right way, with study, with work, with dignity. Mr. Jack held his daughter's hand over the table. I always knew you'd go far, Maya, since you were little, but I never imagined you'd reach so high while keeping your feet on the ground. Maya smiled, moved. I learned from you. You never had much money, you never had important titles, but you always had dignity. You always taught me that a person's value isn't in what they have, but in what they are. Mrs. Iris wiped away her tears. And now are you going to London? Maya thought for a moment before answering. I don't know yet. It's an incredible opportunity. But I also know that opportunities appear for those who are prepared. If I refuse this one, others will come. The important thing is to do what makes sense for me, not what impresses others. During the weekend, Maya reflected deeply. She walked through Central Park, where she used to go when she needed to think. She sat on the same bench where she had sat months before, when she was about to face that decisive meeting, and she realized how much she had grown since then. She realized she didn't need to prove anything anymore. She didn't need to accept every opportunity that appeared just to validate her value. She knew who she was. She knew what she was capable of, and that was already enough. On Monday, Maya entered Sterling's office and gave her answer. Mr. Sterling, I thank you immensely for the trust and the opportunity, but I've decided to decline the position in London. I want to continue here in New York, contributing to the company's growth on this side of the Atlantic. I believe I can make more of a difference staying where I am. Sterling looked at her for a long moment before smiling. You know what, Maya? That answer only confirms that I made the right choice in valuing you, because you don't seek power or prestige. You seek purpose, and that is rare, very rare. He extended his hand. So be it. You continue here, doing the exceptional work you already do, and know that you will always have my respect and recognition. The following months brought stability and satisfaction for Maya. She continued leading international projects, mentoring new employees, and being an example of competence and humility. Her name began to be recognized in the New York corporate market as a reference in international relations. But what fulfilled her most weren't the praises or the professional recognition. It was knowing that in some way, her story had changed the perspective of many people. It was seeing young employees believing they could also grow, regardless of where they started. It was witnessing a corporate culture transforming, albeit slowly, to value people beyond appearances and titles. One morning, Maya was in the boardroom preparing materials when Mrs. Higgins entered to clean. The lady stopped when she saw Maya and smiled. Good morning, girl. How are you? Maya stood up and hugged the lady affectionately. I'm well, Mrs. Higgins. And you? Well, too, you know, I was thinking these days. When you arrived here so small, so quiet, with that worn bag, I never imagined you'd get where you got. But at the same time, I knew you were special. There was something different about you. Maya held the lady's hands. Mrs. Higgins, you treated me with dignity when no one else looked at me. I'll never forget that, and I want you to know that everything I achieved didn't change who I am. I'm still the same Maya who sat with you in the cafeteria on the first day. Mrs. Higgins squeezed her hands tightly. I know, girl. And that's why you're truly special. When evening fell over New York, Maya stayed alone in the room for a few minutes, looking out the window at the city that never sleeps. She thought about everything she had lived through, the difficulties, the humiliations, the closed doors, but also the achievements, the lessons, the transformations, and she understood something fundamental. Her journey was never about taking revenge on those who underestimated her. It was about proving to herself that it was possible to remain true to her own values, even in a world that often values appearance more than essence. It was about showing that humility and competence can walk together. It was about being the change she wanted to see in the world. As she put away her materials and prepared to leave, Maya smiled. It wasn't a smile of arrogant triumph. It was a smile of peace, of someone who knows they did the best they could, of someone who knows that true success isn't in how high you rise, but in how many people you help rise with you. And at that moment, Maya knew her story was just beginning, because people who transform environments don't stop. They continue, they inspire, they multiply. And so, with the same discreet and determined posture as always, Maya Sullivan left the building and walked down Park Avenue toward the subway, carrying within her the certainty that the greatest treasure anyone can have is not external recognition, but the inner peace of someone who knows who they are regardless of who sees them. Dear listeners, we hope that Maya Sullivan's story has touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of perseverance and dignity, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what marked you the most. Every day, we bring intense stories like this one, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul.